Hola, audiencia, y bienvenidos a Hoy Dimelo Cinema Club. I'm your host, Jason Ishmael Eccles, and I am joined by my illustrious panel of co-hosts this evening, Don Dino Spezzini, JP Saruno, Chris. I don't know Chris's last name, and that's fine.
We don't have to know his last name.
And Michaela Booth. Welcome,
actually...
everybody. Let's get straight into our pick today. Young Frankenstein is my selection. The reason I chose this movie, as anyone who's ever participated or watched the show knows, I only pick movies I haven't seen. And this was one of the embarrassing ones that I haven't seen because it's on everybody's list as being hilarious and funny, and it's Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, and I've never seen it. So I was really happy to jump into it and knock this one off my list. I'll save my final thought for last and just let you guys, my first thought for last, and let you guys go before me, because I would really love to hear what you guys have to say. Chris, why don't you lead us off, my man?
So for me, I hadn't seen this in like 20 years, this film. I recently seen Spaceballs. So I was back in like a Mel Brooks state of mind. But the things that I noticed, the biggest thing right away is if you turn off the volume on this movie, and you don't let Gene's crazy reactions own you, it's almost like you could watch this like an old school horror movie. Like if you can't hear the words and the inflection and the sarcasm and everything, this movie legitimately seems like it is from the 1930s with no sound. And ironically, I looked it up. The only two things it was nominated for Academy Awards. The two that it was Best Adapted Screenplay, which is Wilder and Mel Brooks. And then the other one was Best Sound. And I felt like that was throughout the movie between the lightning and the thunder and everything throughout. I just thought it was awesome the way they did it.
Best adapted screenplay. What is that adapted from?
I don't know. I guess from the actual Frankenstein. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, because it's based on Frankenstein and
Bride of Frankenstein's. The different versions.
Okay.
There's like 5 movies, I think.
All right. Well, Michaela, why don't you give us a first impression?
Well, I love all things Frankenstein.
It's Frankenstein.
Hate you. No, like this, like you can tell that Mel Brooks wrote a love letter to what this genre is, and it's so fun. He nails all the tropes in a way that's fun and playful. He really pays attention to the characters, so they're more 3-dimensional than just parodies should be, and it's one of my favorite films.
Awesome.
Nice.
Dino, why don't you give us a first impression?
I, like many people, have already seen it. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't know if that's 5 years or so. And every now and then I go back to it. Usually I think kind of like Chris, where I have it's Mel Brooks time, and I kind of watch Blazing Saddles and this and a few of the other ones. I really like it. It is one of those that kind of is a little jarring at first if you think of Mel Brooks, because it's not your typical one. But I really enjoy it. There's a lot of lines that I still kind of say from time to time. So, yeah. I enjoy it a lot. I know a lot of it. When back in the day when there were DVDs, kids, they would also have audio commentaries, and I would watch it with the audio commentaries and the deleted scenes and the gag all that before streaming and stuff like that. So I have a lot of tidbits of the making of this movie that I can sprinkle in throughout as we keep talking.
Wow, that sounds great, Dino. JP, give us a first impression, please.
Well, before I do that, why buy a Blu-ray and why bother getting the bonus disc when you got a Dino in your group? You don't need no bonus disc. You don't need no special edition metallic aluminum tin discs. We got Dino. I really like this movie. I like most of Mel Brooks's films. I kind of have to. I agree with Dino. This one, I think it's because this is gonna sound odd because it's Mel Brooks that we're talking about. I feel like this out of all his films is like pretty much the most grounded and also the most actually like it no like I'm betting this has to deal with Gene Wilder's influence in the movie. Like it feels the most like it is not almost like an homage to the genre. Where other films I've seen of his, like it's obviously poking fun of the movies that they're based upon, especially Spaceballs, because I love Spaceballs to death. That movie's fucking awesome. I can never say like, oh, it's a serious sci-fi. It's like no, but like Young Frankenstein, up until like maybe the last scene of the movie, I can honestly say is like, yeah, like Young Frankenstein, I would consider to be a Frankenstein movie. And they even do some. They do a lot of the scenes from the previous iterations of Frankenstein. Gene Hackman, of course, played the blind man, and that scene is so like iconic, and it's almost done like beat to beat the same scene, except with a little few Looney Tune gags in it. And what else? My mind. Oh, I guess like this movie managed to get a few sets from the original Frankenstein movies, which like is crazy. Like, oh my god, that's nuts. So like they never went like I think Spaceballs was kind of close into like trying to mirror image the thing that they were making fun of, but this one for sure like did it right. And like yeah, fun. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say just because it was one of the like the original Frankenstein was one of Mel Brooks' favorite like movies growing up.
Oh yeah, so like and you could tell like it was obviously made by a fan who wanted to do it right, and yeah, it is basically a Frankenstein movie, but fucking hilarious.
Well, to that, just to add to that, JP, one of the reasons why it's so close to actual Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein is, yeah, Gene Wilder loved the movie, and when he wrote the first thing, and then Mel Brooks jumped in, and he was like, "Hey Mel, like I'm only gonna do this movie with you. Like you can only direct, you cannot act in it." And Mel Brooks was like, "What? What do you mean?" And it was like, "Because you're gonna do like shticky and like break the fourth wall and all this stuff." He's like, "I want it as close as possible to what could be a Frankenstein movie, right? Even with all the gags and stuff like." Hold for a helicopter. Even though, like, so that was Gene Wilder pushing it and telling Mel Brooks, like, "You're not gonna be in it. You're gonna do it Mel Brooksian, and I want this to be as straight as possible." He was even, play it straight, and he wanted it in black and white, and the studio was like, "No, let's do it in color. We can change it to black and white later." And they were like, "No, we're doing a black and white, because if we give you guys color, you guys are gonna want to then just push it color all the way."
Gross,
so yeah, Gene Wilder really fought for this to be as close to the original kind of Frankenstein movies.
Awesome.
All right, very cool.
And we have a new addition. Beep, 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 beep.
Hello, Steve. Welcome to Oi Dimelo Cinema Club. Did you watch the movie this week?
I did, and I watched it in style. You see that big screen right there?
Oh, very nice.
That's where I saw the movie.
So tell us about your first impression of it.
So actually, this was my first time watching this film. I know, surprising. So I'm gonna say that by the way, I gotta say I love Mel Brooks. I love his films. I've seen many of them. Surprisingly, I haven't seen this one, and I was quite shocked by how, I guess, grounded this film was, because I'm so used to like Mel Brooks just throwing so many wacky jokes like all the time, which this movie had, but like it still felt like more of like an actual film, not like a rapid comedy sketch, I guess. And yeah, and like I thoroughly enjoy myself every time I can watch Gene Wilder on screen. Is a delight, because his takes and the way that he just portrays all the different characters that he did during his time is freaking amazing. And yeah, I really enjoyed this film, because I've watched other Frankenstein movies, but surprisingly, again, I haven't watched Young Frankenstein, so it was interesting because I know we'll get into all that stuff later, but just the parodies they had, Casablanca, like all these different things, it was really fun. So first impressions, 2 thumbs up, really good.
Noise.
Awesome. Well, I guess that leaves me. Steve and I seem to have been the only members on the panel that have not seen the movie before. So here's my first impression of the film. And it's going to be a little jaded one because I've seen this movie kind of late in the game, and it's a comedy. It's a very broad comedy. So you guys may not like my opinion of the movie. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't really care for it as a comedy. As a comedy, it just wasn't that funny. I just feel like the jokes don't really hold up for me. It is probably, I agree, Mel Brooks, some of his most grounded work that I've ever seen. All the performances are pretty good. I think like the core cast are pretty funny in their own right. Like, you know, as far as like playing their type, I think they all do a really good job. Uh, I do like how simple the film is. There's not that many locations. The locations are simple. The camera movements are pretty simple. Um, you know, the sight gags as far as the contraptions and stuff used or whatever is probably the most like complicated thing technically in the movie with the, you know, the switches and the levers going down and all that kind of jazz. That's probably like, you know, that kind of engineering was probably like the, you know, most difficult stuff they did technically on set, I would imagine.
Well, actually, that's the original set. They
Original
were
set.
at the laboratory.
Mhm.
That was the original set.
Oh, that's very cool. It looks
from Frankenstein.
it looks familiar, so I thought maybe they tried to do, you know, their best duplicate, but that's pretty incredible. I love the original Frankenstein movie from 1931. One of my favorite scenes in that movie. I was happy to have a spoof of that scene in this film. We'll probably get into that when we talk about scenes. Uh, so all in all, like I said, I think the movie is well made, well directed. I don't think it holds up very well as a broad comedy. I don't know if generations today would watch this movie and consider it funny. I also do not like at all the breaking of the fourth wall in this film. I know some films make it work and some, you know, whatever, and this might seem like it should be one. I mean, especially because it's like 48 years old now, and you know, I mean, it's not the first time they broke the fourth wall in
Very little did they break the fourth wall.
at least 4 times.
I think
The Igor, he broke the fourth wall
Multiple
like, in
times.
every scene.
although sometimes it could just be his eyes. That
No, he
look
was
like-
talking to the camera.
I don't know, man.
It's 100% break.
But he was
The
kind of
camera would center on him and he would turn to it and like give a look like that's crazy, audience. I mean, come on, man, it's obvious. So I will say that that's my first impression. There are some things we can explore. Not a bad film. I just don't love it, man. And I'm really sorry about that because I've been waiting a lifetime to watch it.
I think it's one of those when I first saw it as a wee lad in Paraguay.
Yeah.
I was like, Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder, this is not funny. I felt kind of very similar. And by like watching it again, I started to find the little nuggets in there of, you know, but yeah, it's not a broad comedy, and kind of Gene Wilder didn't want it to be kind of broad. And that's maybe the way we're looking at it. We're thinking laugh out loud type of comedy thing. But
I think Gene Wilder is spot on in his performance of this thing. It's just a lot of the, honestly, it's a lot of the direction I don't really like.
Am I the only one when they first find the lab? And maybe because we did watch Willy Wonka not so long ago, I feel like that I was waiting for the same song in Willy Wonka where he opens the thing and
Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, but when he comes in and he starts his little dance and song, I was kind of waiting for that, and I was like, I wonder if that would be good if someone edits that kind of like music into Frankenstein. So for all of you editing nuts out there, maybe take a swing at it.
Well, let's go ahead and get into like some personal thoughts, and you guys feel free to take a swing at me at any point for not liking this movie as much as the rest of you, but maybe my mind will be changed. That's happened before. All right, so let's get into, well, you know what? Let's do scenes.
Okay.
Let's talk about our favorite scenes because I'm kind of excited to do that. So, Steve, why don't you lead us off with like maybe a scene that you liked the most in this movie, or one that left a big impression on you?
I mean, I gotta mention it. The sex scenes, to me, they were hilarious.
Anyone surprised?
They were hilarious to me. Because Hollywood these days, makes all that soft core type of scenes, and like this one, and the fact that like she breaks down into like singing,
Yeah.
that to me was like amazing. And again, spoiler alert, but the final scene, I was like,
That was the best joke in the movie.
Yeah.
Which one? What?
Very popular character.
When with the monster got some of his brains,
Oh,
and then
yeah. What did he get?
what did he get? Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, it almost was like the Michael Jackson Thriller thing for a second. You just like kind of went in on his face. Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed a lot of the quick little bits or jokes of like roll in the hay. But one of them is the Ritz.
Putting on the Ritz.
Yeah. Which apparently Mel Brooks has even talked about how that was like the one thing he fought Gene Wilder, where Mel Brooks didn't think it was funny. And he was like, this is not gonna hit. Like the audience, like this is not gonna be
Mel was the one that said no to that.
Yeah, Mel Brooks. That was like the one thing where he's like, this is not gonna be funny, it's not gonna work, blah blah blah. And Gene Wilder was like, no, blah blah blah. And then for like the first audience that they played it, people just lost it. And Mel Brooks was like, well, shit. So that's definitely up, because that's kind of iconic, right? Like, and that's where, it pulls you out, because it's like, wait, what year is this? So that's one of my favorite ones, the putting on the Ritz.
Not only what year was it, but a lot of the people in the movie forgot that they were German.
Yeah, often.
Michaela, what about you? What says you? A favorite scene or a scene that stuck out for you?
I think like anything to do with like the peasants, like the villagers, especially like the captain. Just every time he's on screen, I can't hold it together. Like, can you imagine like having to like figure out exactly each move?
Oh God, he worked it.
Like, it doesn't seem that hard, but like he was so specific in every single scene he was in with that.
That's like
I can't.
I'm sure the sound editing to the movement helped, because like he never once said that his arm was fake. Like it's not straight up said in the movie until the end where it pops off. He never says that it's a fake arm. He just
So there was a point that I noticed. There was one scene where he was using a different arm.
Oh.
So I'm wondering, like, when they're coming out of the building to like go look for Frankenstein or whatever, he's doing a different arm. I'm like, are both of their arms wooden?
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's also gags that they would do, kind of like, I thought the hump was on the other side, right? And then they've done, so a lot of bits that Mel Brooks kind of, rehashes in his movies. Like, instead of the hump, it's the mole. Wasn't the mole on the other side? What mole? And
I have a mole.
Yeah. So the throwing the darts, and he's just like nice grouping. I always assume it was like he lost his arm and his eye from the first monster, from Frankenstein's monster. And I don't know much of the movie if there's kind of like a sheriff or whatever that ends up getting,
Injured,
badly beat or whatever.
He wasn't like a main character, not to that extent.
Right.
Like there was like someone that you're like, yes, voice of authority, this man here. But other than that, it's more like I think the father of the kid.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
I mean, the most two things: the "Walk This Way" scene, which is the inspiration for the song "Walk This Way" by Aerosmith, Run DMC
Is
compilation.
it for real?
It is really, it is, yeah.
Shut the door.
What's that? Seriously, yeah.
Shut the door.
So it also like when it's that double entendre-ness where he's like, walk this way, and it's like the manner in which he's walking, but also this direction, you know. So again, playing off those kinds of things. But my favorite scene in the movie is with the monster with the little girl. I feel like somebody else is gonna have noticed this. Frankenstein. Do you know what I'm talking about? With the petals.
Yeah.
And when he looks at her like he's gonna toss her down the well, he like looks towards the wall. That to me is the best scene, because if you saw the original, it's way more messed up. Well,
right.
You know,
I mean, that's a classic shot right there of Frankenstein with the little girl.
Well, I'll just jump in on top of that because that's my favorite scene in the movie too.
Yeah.
Because that's my favorite scene in the original Frankenstein. Friend, you know, that's the whole thing. That's the crux of the whole story for me. So when this movie did that, I'm like, oh man, I'm really interested to see what they're about to do with this scene, you know? And you do think like, man, he's about to chuck this little girl into the well or whatever. So it's just pretty funny to see her sort of fly in the air and that whole visual gag of her laying in bed and like she's knocked out and she's asleep and the parents are, yeah. So that I thought that whole little sequence was pretty cool, pretty well done. I was excited about that. JP, did we do you?
No, I mean, technically my favorite scene is putting on the Ritz. It's Peter Boyle just like, because I don't think he does, like, every time he says put on the Ritz, it's different. And I just love the different choices. But, since we already brought that one up, I gotta mention the scene I mentioned in my first impression, the blind men scene with Gene Hackman and Peter Boyle. Because, that was the scene that, like, broke my heart when watching the original Frankenstein. Is like, because, you know, this blind man's trying so hard and to make a new friend. It's genuine. It tugs at your heartstrings a little bit because he has no idea that, you know, he's in communication with a fucking, like, an abomination or whatever. But in this scene, they just take a giant shit on it. And it's just, you gotta appreciate that. And the soup, oh my god! Like, I gotta wonder, like, hopefully, Brooks didn't fucking like mess around with Peter too many times, because I could see it, like, them actually purposely pouring the soup on his lap to get a reaction out of him. I mean, I think there was enough distance where that didn't happen, but in my mind,
be hot soup. Is that what you're saying, that they would drop hot soup? That wouldn't have been the case for sure.
That's probably
it was like
Jackass
in the
movie. Like I like that bit. Yeah, right. Fucking young Jackass, young Franken ass. So I wanted to ask you guys, because I was struggling with it a little bit. Where do you guys place this in the Mel Brooks canon of films? Like, do you guys place this pretty high up there? Is this in the middle, below, second place, first? Like, where do you guys think this stands in his work?
It's not his funniest.
Go ahead.
It's not his funniest, but it might be his best. Something about the way he directed this movie is so much different and more like a real film than the other, you know, even though it's a spoof. But I don't think it's his funniest. I think that other ones have better lines and things and I think this movie has good lines, don't get me wrong, but it's his best movie, I think. And I think everyone's talking about how it's grounded, so I guess that's part of it, right?
Okay.
You know what's crazy? I think, especially watching it this time around, kind of like with the original producers, I see this more as a Gene Wilder picture than a Mel Brooks picture. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to, like, rank it amongst Mel Brooks' stuff, and I think it's a lot easier to rank it with Gene's. Even though I'm not gonna lie, Gene's performance in this movie, in my opinion, kind of gets repetitious, just because, like, he knows what his character is, and he just has that way of talking where it's like, you know, like I'm gonna do a really bad impersonation of it, where it's like he's talking calmly, slowly, a bit of staccato, rising action and volume, and perhaps some yelling. Brooks, like that type of he does that so many times in the movie where it's like, oh, that's his character. Like that's Gene Wilder. He does that in every movie, but I feel like he does it so many times. He almost abuses that right in this movie. But I guess
it's the most perfect movie he's ever used it in.
For sure.
Ideal for that character.
So I kind of agree that this is more Gene Wilder than Mel Brooks. And I think they kind of had a falling out. And I think this is partly what led to it. And, the fact that it ended up also being written by Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, I think was a little bit maybe of an issue, if I'm not mistaken, because this is the last movie Gene Wilder did with Mel Brooks. So I think this is maybe a turning point of the friendship two, and kind of Mel Brooks's style of filming. Almost, you could kind of say after this it becomes way more spoofy, his movies.
I did read about an interview where Gene Wilder told a story about him getting in an argument, like a screaming argument with Mel Brooks during the writing. And Mel Brooks left like super pissed off and called him like 5 minutes later and was like, dude, what's going on over at your house? Who's that lunatic over there freaking out at the top of their lungs? And like played it off. And then, so that's a story. I read that somewhere when I was looking through the background of the movie. And it was all about how that was his sense of humor. Like Mel left and made a joke out of the whole thing, even though he was so angry when he left.
Yeah. So I think this kind of, sadly, Gene Wilder wanted it more grounded, wanted it, not played for laughs. So I think maybe some people like the directing, you're kind of off with it. And I think there is a little bit of a struggle. My main thing with it is the pacing. The pacing at times seems a little bit off, for sure. But
I can sort of see what you mean there too. For me, obviously I don't hold this in the highest Mel Brooks, as far as, his catalog of work. For me, that's Blazing Saddles, and probably always will be. But honestly, I understand why this movie is dear to people. I get it. It's a cool black and white film. It's perfect comedy for any time. It's absolutely perfect during like the Halloween season. Obviously, it's a good monster movie in its own right. But Blazing Saddles is like, for me, it's one of the best movies ever, or comedies ever. And also, I'm also a little weirded out with how high this thing is on the AFI 100 comedies list. This movie ranked in at number 13.
Really? For comedy?
Number 13. Blazing Saddles was only at like 9 or 8, I think. So I'm like, he has 2 movies in the top 15. I just don't know if Young Frankenstein, for me, even gets into the top 100, just simply because I didn't laugh that much.
Yeah, I know he didn't. We watched it last night. I was cracking up. I've seen it. I think if you see it again, you might enjoy it more, right? Because I think you go, and that was me. You go into it thinking Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder, Blazing Saddles, Space, like all that, and then it's not that. So it's almost like I kind of equate it to The Big Lebowski, in the sense that like the first time I watched The Big Lebowski and all that, I was like, what is this? Is it supposed to be fun? I couldn't quite grasp it the first time I saw it, and it took me watching Big Lebowski again and stuff like that to actually kind of see what they were trying to do. And I feel like Young Frankenstein might be that. The cool thing is I've never been, but they do movies at the cemetery here in LA. And a few years ago, they actually did Young Frankenstein at the cemetery. So
I'm sure they're playing that thing all across the country in second run theaters.
I was looking for
right
it now that it's Halloween time. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh man, maybe we can go check it out. But
I'm sure it's on somebody's rooftop.
The closest thing is they're doing the musical. They made a musical of it.
It'll pop up before the end of the month.
There was a Broadway musical at one point, I think.
Yeah,
that's right.
There's a lot of songs in this movie.
Michaela and Steve, did you guys have any input before we moved on?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I personally think that this is my favorite Mel Brooks movie, just because out of all of the different realms that he like parodies, this is the one I spend the most time in. Like Frankenstein is like one of those like weird obsession things with me. Like I read the book every year. Boris Karloff is my favorite actor. You know, like I've already made you guys watch Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You know, and like I feel like it's just part of that legacy of like Hollywood monster films that like just kind of keeps coming back every couple of years, and like we all have like our own little takes on it, and this was like the takes of the 70s for it. And like I think that it's kind of like it almost feels like a weird meme for like boomers in a weird way. Like no, like if you think about it, like Mel Brooks movies were kind of like the way that they did humor and all that. So it's interesting to see like a different portal of time with like such a classic story, and like it's done so well in a way that like you can tell that both creators loved this source material in such a way to like nail the atmosphere. And like it's just always good to see something like that.
That's cool. So that leads me into my next question, because you do like Frankenstein so much. He's practically your boyfriend. What did you think of
My boyfriend. Peter Boyle. How do you feel about Peter Boyle?
Boyle's mask in the movie?
I think that it was a very clever design, because like it wasn't like they made it into his own thing. They kept a lot of like the design elements, but they made it their own. Like he has the zipper on the side of his neck, which is hilarious instead of the deadbolt. You know, they keep it very classic in the way that like the face itself was designed, but it doesn't have quite like the statuesque deco art design that is Boris Karloff, you know. Like even the shoes were very well detailed. Like it's like they created their own monster, but still made it so you knew that it was the monster. And I think it's an excellent design.
Like it's its own thing. It's definitely not like a copy or a ripoff. Like, you know, like the whole it's satire thing, but like you see Peter Boyle's Frankenstein monster, and like you'll believe that that's Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah,
you know.
But like it's also like its own thing.
Yeah.
So briefly, I want to touch on costumes, and I probably wouldn't have. I mean, the costumes I think sort of speak to this small little German village and whatnot. But there was one costume in particular that really like was striking to me. It was Terry Garr's costume when they're outside trying to recapture the monster, I think, you know, and they're jumping on top of them, and she's like putting the syringe in them. She's wearing this beautiful skirt and jacket combo that's just like tailored to absolute perfection. And I was like, that outfit, she could wear that anywhere for like the rest of time, and it's going to be beautiful. Like, so whoever designed her, all her clothes actually are beautiful. They don't feel like the 70s. I don't know about you guys, what you guys thought, but her outfits felt timeless.
100%.
Gene Wilder had some nice costumes as well. Like his tuxedo and stuff, very sharp, dapper, felt like the 70s.
He wore a lot of tuxedos in the movie for sure.
For sure. I mean, I dig a good tuxedo on film, to be honest with you, especially a black and white movie. But yeah, so you guys have any thoughts about costuming in this film?
I thought the most clever one had to be the sheriff again, just because like you look at him and you know that he's a man of authority. He has that like almost he's definitely not wearing like a kettle helmet or whatever like that, but you could tell like, oh, that man is high up there. Also, just a nice little touch of the eye patch with the stupid monocle over the eye patch, and they play with that. Like it's not just a silly like sight gag. They play with the monocle several times where it's like, okay, it has purpose.
I think the first gag is, and you think like, oh, he's gonna put it in his
good eye,
and then he just like puts it in the
puts it over the patch.
Well, it started off on the eye patch too.
Yeah.
That's the
Oh,
thing.
it had fallen off. Maybe I didn't.
Yeah, it fell off and then he puts it back on again. But there was one other costume I want to bring up that I thought was awfully distracting, but I guess kind of love narrative-wise, was the assistant's sequencer's dress. Once the wife arrived, or the fiance, I was like, okay, you never wore anything that flashy in the entire movie beforehand.
Yeah.
Until it's a nice little nod because they don't play with that at all in the movie. It was like ooh, the jealous side piece, but like just having her be in a much more prettier and like just outstanding dress right when the fiance shows up is like we don't need that. That's more than enough.
What is your job? What are you assisting him with?
Yeah, totally. That's Madeline Kahn.
I love Madeline Kahn.
Me too. I think she's great.
This movie's loaded with so many
Chef
talented
kiss.
people.
Yeah.
It's loaded with so many talented people who are bouncing their comedy off one another, and that's awesome for sure.
Taffeta.
Speaking of which, what are your favorite characters or characters you guys may have identified with in this thing?
I mean, how have we not talked about Igor yet? I mean, the man was born with the face for this movie.
By the way, since we mentioned Iger, I also love that bit of the whole like play on
Werewolf?
names. Oh, it's
yeah.
Frankenstein.
Roderick.
I mean, I just love the whole werewolf, there, castle. Like, that's the thing. There's so many just play on words, right? And maybe for me, again, the first time watching it, like, yeah, I was already speaking English. I understood it. But, like, play on words, entendres, puns,
Idioms,
like, all of those. Same thing with Big Lebowski. Those kind of, like, American humor, certain things, like, it takes time, right, to recognize. I even mentioned this, was it to you? No, it was to someone else. Just going to Spaceball, right? They jammed the radar. And it's like, what kind of jam is it? I watched it in Spanish. Mermelada, like marmalade, doesn't make any sense. Why would someone marmalade the radar, right? That's the kind of thing, like your level of English. Like, it's funny, like, oh, there's a jar of marmalade or of jelly hitting the radar is funny, but unless you understand the pun and like the wording and all that, it's not, it's not gonna fully. It's a visual gag, but it's also, punny, if you will. So a lot of those moments in Young Frankenstein, like werewolf, there, castle, and that goes on with the Frankenstein, and then even Igor, he gets a little hurt, so he does it too. Of Igor or Igor? What's the way he pronounces it? Igor. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
For sure. Steve, you got a favorite character or a character you identified with or liked the most, or an actor that gave a performance that touched you?
I'm gonna say towards the end, Frankenstein, when we actually saw him like express himself, like speak, when the whole brain switch and everything.
That was nice.
But
that was a nice touch.
That was really nice. I really enjoyed that because I wasn't expecting it. Again, first time seeing it. I was like, oh, whoa, that's great. But they didn't just keep him to only.
Dude, as a dad, that has been the last 3 years of my life. A small human being that cannot communicate, so they're frustrated at all times. It's exactly like being like a child. Like Frankenstein is like a child who cannot communicate and therefore acts out because he cannot get anybody to understand what the hell he's trying to say. Right?
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think that's the point of his whole character.
And the whole, I think the idea also, like, oh, he's civilized, he's whatever. He's reading the newspaper.
Wall Street Journal, yeah.
Or like with glasses on, like a married couple, kind of like, kind of another day in the life of, right?
Abby Normal.
Yeah.
Abby Normal.
Which I like that joke, actually. JP and Michaela, you guys, favorite character?
You want to go?
Well, I don't think we've talked enough about the fiance because, like, that's usually such a throwaway character in these things. Like, the first woman, you're kind of just like, oh, she's just like a nasty rich bitch, so, like, who cares? Right? But, like, she actually has, like, such a substantial part in this. And, like, the fact that the costumers even got away, like, with getting, like, the streaks in her hair and, like, really, like, emphasizing that. Like, talk about, like, taking a bit part and just like elevating it to something completely different. And so, like, she's probably one of the best, funnest things to watch in this whole thing.
Like, oh, you better like after 7 to 8 quick ones, you brag it to your boys.
I was happy when she showed back up. I mean, like from a script perspective, because it added this extra level of tension to the film, like where now everybody has to scramble. And I was like, oh, this is going to get interesting. There's got to be comedy in this situation. What about you, JP?
Oh man, I don't know. Like, I just love. It's also based on like kind of a semi outdated ideal of like saving it till marriage, and of course the use of cigarettes after a shag. Man, like I think like because to be honest, I think the proper and the correct answer would be Gene Wilder, of course, but I think like for me it has to be Peter Boyle and also Cloris Leachman. Like they're like Peter Boyle because like he like he's not Boris Karloff, and he knows that. He knows that that's not the performance that this character needed, but he still acted the shit out of the monster. Like he was still doing his damnness, and a part of me believes that Mel and Gene probably abused this poor fucker during this movie. He's like, you want me to do what now? You know, but a younger Peter Boyle. And
well, I think that's why they get away with it being young Frankenstein, right? Like from the get-go, it's the grandson. So it's totally fine. Like, this is not the monster. This is the new monster, right? I think that's how they can kind of get away with that kind of thing. But
this might even be the third monster because the town people remember they said that
there were
like this keeps happening.
It does. So my thing, the way I always saw it was that Madeline Kahn's character, like to him, it's like, no, we're saving it, blah blah blah. But then when she hooks up with the monster, and then she talks about all men just 6, 7, 8 times. So to me, I thought she was having sex with everyone else but Gene Wilder. Am I the only one that saw it like that?
Oh no, I heard that as Peter Boyle like made her night and just went at it again and again. Like that's how I read it. It was like she did save herself for just Gene, but once she found out, like, because the party's like, that's a dumb line. There's no man that can do that. But I was like, oh wait, but that was her first. Like that's her introduction to sex. She probably believes that, oh, this is probably normal that a man can go at it like more than what? Like,
JP, don't be jealous.
Shut up.
I mean, he's a monster. And they mentioned his ding dong like 11 times.
Yeah, they did. Very popular.
But
what about you, Chris? Did you was Igor your pick, or what did you?
Yeah, so for me, there's something. Marty Feldman, he's an awesome actor. He's in a couple other Mel Brooks movies too. Yeah. He's in the one with oh my god,
he's in Silent Movie.
Silent Movie. That's what I was trying to think of. Dude, what's the name of the heavyset guy in that?
Oh, is that Sid Caesar?
It's not Sid Caesar. Dom DeLuise, I think.
Yeah. Who was also in Blazing Saddles as the choreographer.
Yes. So for me, dude, that guy, I mean, I get it. Like, that is actually his eyes. But man, he just plays that. Like, that is a character in itself, just the way that he faces. And one of my favorite scenes is with him and Madeline Kahn when she shows up. And he starts repeating all the things that Gene Wilder had said. And like, yeah, we're going to go up to bed now, right? We're going to go out quickly. Let's go now. He just kept doing the same shtick. Apparently, the movie originally was like double the length. And it wasn't as good because there was too many things that just didn't land. And there was too long. And I do think, Jason, to your point, do think there are some times where it goes a long time without a laugh.
Yeah.
One that really gets me. Not, and a couple minutes, as opposed to, there are a couple gaps in the movie. So I get that, where it's not like just line after line for me. Some things hit and other things are a little too on the nose, I guess. But then again, I guess it's a product of its time.
If you look up the bloopers, that scene where Madeline Kahn gets there is the one they like couldn't get through it.
Just
Like,
laughing.
Yeah, because Igor is like biting her fur coat and all that, and like the head, like they just
That was
He has the
commitment.
stuff in his mouth.
yeah, all of them just kept cracking up, and so everyone, I'd say, look for the bloopers, just because, especially for that one, there was like 6 or more takes of just trying to get through it.
And as far as
You take the
character
blonde and I'll
actors
take the one
go,
with the turban.
what was that?
You take the blonde and I'll take the one with the turban.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, that I actually like that line quite a bit. That was pretty funny because it just seems like a guy thing to say and do. And at no point did like Igor ever like be. He was never that guy before that moment. So that was actually pretty.
And then
funny.
they're like, seriously, if you need any help with the
Yeah, with the ladies, if you need any help with the ladies, if I need any help. No, that was great. If the last 2 weeks are any indicator of like what. If anybody ever had any doubt about being in entertainment because of like one's look, because you don't look like a movie star, or you don't like sound like a movie star, or you don't like, all that goes out the window when we look at the performances of Marty Feldman and Peter Lorre last week.
Mm-hmm.
2 different guys from 2 totally different generations, both weird looking dudes who can frankly act their butts off, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of dig that. That was a nice little parallel we had. So I'm glad nobody mentioned my favorite character in this thing, because there was a scene that came on
little boy
with the the blind guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like you asked Dino, I was like, man, this guy's a really good actor. And then when the movie went off, like, Gene Hackman, what? Like, I couldn't believe
And
it.
he's like, I was gonna look up who that was to see his other movies.
That's
I
Lex
had no
Luthor.
clue. I had no clue. He was so good. It's like Gene Hackman just sort of appears in a lot of movies that way, where he only had like one scene or just a bit part, and he completely stamps an impression on these movies.
Well,
There's so many of them like that.
I don't, and I told you, I don't know how young he was in this movie, but I only have like Gene Hackman like in 40s, mid to late 40s, 50s. That's my Gene Hackman.
This
you
is
know?
Very early film career. Gene
Yeah,
Hackman.
the Conversation, Enemy of the State, that's what Gene Hackman looks like already balding, right?
Yeah,
like he's got some age to him. So to see him, there are some actors like that if I see them in like a young, like to me, Gene Wilder was like aged gracefully.
What about those eyelashes on Gene Wilder, huh?
Yeah.
Whoever decided to put that much mascara on that man, that was like a very purposeful decision, and we are all better for it.
I felt like it was because it's a black and white film. His eyes would pop out more, you know?
But to me, Gene Wilder, I mean, he got more wrinkly as he got older, but his hair was always crazy. Like, he never quite changed in my mind. Whereas Gene Hackman, it's like, nah, Gene
Hackman was always an old man?
Yeah, for me, always an old man.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, he was always like, except for in this movie, I feel like he was always the most mature person on screen. He was always like the guy you look to in the scene.
In the original Frankenstein movie, did he pray to have someone come and be his friend, or like that?
The blind guy.
Yeah. I think the blind, like the scene is literally played almost the same in the movie from what I recall, except he doesn't fuck up all the shit. But yeah, he's praying and then he hears.
He doesn't pour soup on his crotch 7 times.
Yeah, he doesn't pour soup, doesn't fucking annihilate a porcelain cup.
I love how much the monster wanted the soup too, though. He really wanted that soup. He really wanted it. He wanted the wine. He was happy to get that. Those were good bits too, because I'm like, how is he not going to get this wine? Because you knew he wasn't going to get it. Just like I just didn't know what was
So
going
the
to happen.
monster breaks the fourth wall there as well, because like
Yeah.
when the thing breaks, he like
Come on, you
Yeah.
guys. Can I not have anything good in life?
so yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say I read Frankenstein, but I was back in high school, so I don't remember much of it. Other than Mary Shelley, her and I forget who the other Baron or who the
Her husband and a close family friend.
yeah, they all had
And
to. It was
Dr.
a rainy weekend or some shit like that, and they wanted to have a competition of who could write the scariest story, and like that's where Frankenstein came from.
There
Like,
actually is a Mary Shelley movie that came out like in the last 2 or 3 years about her life and how she wrote that.
there's also a Doctor Who episode where I think they go and they're in the house during that time.
See,
So
what,
be willing to
what
compete, folks.
I was gonna say,
Maybe you'll
what I'm
make it
getting from here,
time today.
literary worksmen and whatever, they gotta wager more because that's how we got green eggs and ham through a fucking wager. Just like
You want to tell us that story really
Yeah.
quick?
How about
oh yeah, I think the wager was the published fucking Dr. Seuss's publisher was like you can't write a book with less than 52 words. And it's like, come at me, brother. I'll rhyme with just 10, asshole. And that's how Green Eggs and Ham came to be.
Awesome. Sometimes you need like confinements and
Yeah.
frames to create, I think. All right, so why don't we jump straight into our final thoughts on this week's film? The floor is open, please.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. It's probably what my favorite Mel Brooks movie. I mean, yes, I am biased. Anything that has to do with Frankenstein, like I'm going to like. usually. I think it's really fun, and I really do feel like it is a love language, like a love letter to these movies in particular. And like just like the way that Mel like copied the cinematography, and it's just they get all the details right, and that's why this movie has stayed through the entire. It's what parody should do.
Very cool. Very cool. Dino, why don't
Yeah,
you?
I'll go. I'm glad Michaela said this is her favorite because I know we were kind of iffy, but I think that shows the beauty of Mel Brooks's filmography, where I think depending what genre you're in and maybe at what age do you watch certain movies of him, that's your favorite, right? So maybe the people into Star Wars and all that, maybe Spaceball really lands with them. Like the first movie I think that I saw in full was Men in Tights, Robin Hood Men in Tights. Again, I was very young, so I didn't quite understand everything of it. But then since then, then I went and watched pretty much all of them. Blazing Saddles is my favorite for sure because I'm also huge into the cowboy genre. So I really like the fact that we do have someone that this is their favorite Mel Brooks movie. Again, I enjoy the movie. It's not laugh out loud all the time, but it's one that I will revisit every now and then. It's one I will recommend people if they want to, if maybe they're into Mel Brooks or if they're into monster movies and stuff like that, Gene Wilder. I'd recommend that because it is entertaining and different, and yeah, so I dig it.
Steve, how about you?
I'm gonna say that this film was needed, and the reason I say that is because I don't know. I always felt like Frankenstein was always like very one-dimensional as a character, and like this movie kind of gave him like a personality, and I really enjoy that because it made me kind of like Frankenstein more. Because before, I, I would see Frankenstein. Like I think my one of my first exposures to Frankenstein was when I was a kid, and I went to Universal Studios in Orlando, and they had like the Beetlejuice musical show or something, and like Frankenstein will come out, whatever. And then afterwards, I saw like the old movies, and now I see this movie, and it's like, oh, look at this. Even though like I can understand that it's a parody and all that stuff, but it's just like it gives more personality to the character, and I enjoy that because it makes me like it more. Uh, I do agree what JP said earlier that yeah, Gene Wilder has like that I'm gonna go low to then crescendo to then scream, but this was like the perfect movie for it. Like it fit the character so perfectly. And overall, like Jason said earlier, it's an all-star cast of people. Like everybody, pretty much, I could tell not only that they had a blast filming this, but that everybody brought their A game to
Yep.
this film. And from being a Mel Brooks fan, because I love his movies, this indeed felt like the most grounded. It felt more like a film than anything, and I really enjoyed it.
I don't want to be a stickler, Steve, but were you talking about Frankenstein's monster having personality, not Frankenstein?
Frankenstein.
Is that
Yeah,
what it was? Sorry, that's such a nerdy thing of
Yeah,
correcting.
I caught it too. I wasn't
Yeah,
going to
yeah, yeah.
correct him though.
That's why I waited to afterwards because I was gonna do it as a bit and
yeah, the
not
monster.
and
Okay.
not interrupt him in the middle of his like final thought.
So let me
If
say, because we didn't mention it, and I think it deserves a very honorable mention, just only because none of us said it. Cloris Leachman is brilliant in this film. She's a wonderful straight man until she's
yes,
not anymore, and then she's serving up the jokes too. She's really fantastic.
He was my boyfriend.
I thought that was great. I thought she was really fantastic in this thing. I love like the little bits too, like
Going up to the
yeah,
painting.
where she's like kissing the painting and stuff, and it looks exactly like him. Like, oh, this is gonna get weird. Yeah, that's cool. So let me just give you my final thought, and then we can do JP and Chris. So my final thought on this film is after listening to how much you guys appreciate the film, I do have a great appreciation for it as a film, as a piece of like Americana, and a piece of cinema, and a piece of like one of our geniuses, Mel Brooks's catalog. But for me, it doesn't really stand that strong as a comedy, which is what I was leaning on it as. Would I recommend this to people? I would recommend this to people who haven't seen it, who like comedies. I would recommend it to people Halloween time who like monster movies. I would not recommend this, but I would put a label on it. Like this is how I felt about it. But it is a classic, and you should probably see it, and you'll probably feel differently. I feel like I'm in a small boat, but that's how I feel. Would I watch it again? I'm not opposed to watching this again. I could see myself watching this like in a theater, around this time of year with friends, or if someone wanted to throw it on, I wouldn't like poo poo it from the party. So yeah, I think this movie, for me, doesn't hold up as a comedy, but it is a well made film, and I think the simplicity of it is what sort of makes it brilliant. And probably some of his most grounded work, like we mentioned many times. JP, Chris, why don't you guys send us off? Okay, either or.
I was like, I'm not gonna move till you move.
I was almost I was tempted to just like
Not move.
stare down and then just
Yes.
Yeah, that's a ticket.
Playing
That's
chicken.
a funny shot, by the way. Like that really hokey, like zoom in and then just like an obvious freeze frame. Like it's one of those iconic shots of the movie. I love that. Yeah. It's not again like I guess this is like I'm basically just preaching to the choir, repeating, rewind and repeat. You could fast forward through my final thought because you guys already heard it. Whereas like when in regards to Mel Brooks movies, like whatever is like your genre, like you will most likely feel more attached to that one. Except I guess not the Leslie Nielsen one. Just watch this one. Don't watch the vampire one. I mean,
Dracula.
it's not bad, but I mean, no, it's bad. It's funny, but it's not. But this one's a movie. But yeah. Overall, like it's a good film. Good time in my opinion. I definitely would recommend this, of course, to fans of comedic films, fans of satire. You would definitely enjoy this film, especially more old school esque cinephiles. And like I think the reason why this movie really works for me is the same reason that Michaela likes it. Like I got into the whole Frankenstein thing much later on in life. It's a more recent thing, but getting more into that old Hollywood like Universal Pictures horror show, woo, spooky, like you get a greater appreciation when you are familiar with the material, and then you watch this movie, kind of like with Abbott and Costello. That one, I think that one was a much better film than this one in regards to classic horror films. But like this one, I think it's high up there. I still consider it as a Frankenstein movie, Frankenstein. And if you are a fan of Gene Wilder and you haven't seen this movie, what the fuck is wrong with you? Put pause on trains, planes, and automobiles for a second and just watch this one. Or no, he wasn't in that one. He was in
I know. I was gonna say clearly you're not a Gene Wilder fan.
Nice try.
You know we will hear no
I
evil.
was Silver Street.
Gene Wilder fan.
Or Madeline Kahn.
Yeah.
She.
To Chris, I'm gonna go away.
So I'll be super quick. For me, it's all about focus. I would recommend this movie to anybody that's going to remake or spoof a movie. They did such a good job of putting all the elements into the movie and then changing the genre of the movie. So they did everything you're supposed to do. They found the sets. They pulled everything together. So it looked just like the original movie. And then they turned it into a comedy. So for me, like that is what people should do. If they're going to remake something in a world where everything is remade these days, it is cool when you get to see actual things that were in the original movie, whereas so many things change genres completely in a different way. Like the new Ghostbusters is completely different than Venkman and the way that we saw it as kids. So for me, that's the biggest thing. That if I was going to recommend it, I would recommend that people should watch it before they make a remake.
That's
Nice.
a really great call. Yeah. I think you're right about
I
that.
like it.
So that concludes our review of Young Frankenstein, and it really just leaves me with one more question. Steve, what do you got for us next week?
Next week, I don't know why you asked me because I'm been on hiatus. I'm traveling. It is Chris' turn. Chris, what do you got for us next week?
So I got a choice. You guys are going to get to pick two of my favorite movies of all time. So they're in my top 10, both of them. I don't know which one you're going to go with first, Steve.
Whichever you want.
One is Clue
Oh.
from the 1980s. This is a movie that I watched probably way too young. I probably should not have watched it at the age I watched it the first time, just based on the jokes and things. Also has Madeline Kahn in it, by the way. You can see her down the bottom there. And then the second one is completely different. It's Cool Hand Luke. So that movie reminds me of my dad, so I threw that one in as well. My dad used to cut the head off of parking meters. If you never saw, no, I'm just kidding. But it reminds me of him, just something about it. So those are my two choices for this week. I'll let you guys totally pick.
That one has the guy on the ranch bottles. You guys know those ranch
With
bottles.
the salsa. Yeah.
I gotta flip a coin.
He makes movies? I didn't know that.
I think he races cars too.
What?
Used to.
Yeah,
I know. I'm just gonna
All right,
shut up.
I got my answer from flipping a coin.
I got my answer too.
He's gonna die. You guys, I'll give you guys my answer.
Are we ready?
Count us down, Chris.
Do you want to do the? All right. So Clue will be one.
Yep.
Cool Hand Luke will be two.
Yep.
All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, is it? Whoa!
Oh, he did it.
Is that two or is that one, Steve?
Yeah, two.
I went with a 1 and then a 2 right here.
But then they got together, so what is it? Is it a 1 or a 2, Steve?
No, he really wants to watch Clue.
No, I guess Cool Hand Luke won, right?
Have anybody ever have you guys seen it?
Yeah,
I have seen Cool Hand Luke.
Okay.
I've seen both of them.
I have not seen Clue.
I seen Clue. I seen Clue, so that's why I picked Cool Hand Luke.
Okay.
Well, there you go. We
All
had
right.
some non-watchers, and that's what ended up
This is
happening.
about.
So next week, Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman.
We go for
Cool
Michaela,
beans.
JP, Jason Echoes, Hold on Dino, Chris, and me, Steve WCB. We'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
Ciao.